So a while back, I was browsing YouTube, as you do, and I came across this video about pearlescent colorshift watercolors. And I wish I could tell you what that video was, but I can't find it anymore. It has yeeted itself from my YouTube watch history for some reason. Anyway, so this video showcased some unique color shifting watercolors, and I'm a sucker for duochrome, so I went to the Etsy shop that these paints came from, and I saw this. Holographic watercolors. And I had to know, are these paints truly holographic? So I bought them. How do you pronounce this paint company? Yuli? Yuli Paints? I-U-I-L-E. We're gonna call her Jeannie. That's her name. That's the owner of the paint company. Jeannie sells these dot cards so that you can try out a series of watercolors without having to commit to the full price of a pan or a palette. It's a great way to test out colors so you can pick the ones that you like the most. I snagged the hologram series dot card, which comes with the next level glitter holo paint, the rainbow holo, the holo, disco holo, and a bonus sample for Stardust, which is coming soon if I remember correctly. I also picked up the G series and the Ocean's 8 watercolor dot cards. I couldn't help myself, like I said, I'm a sucker for duochrome. While I was browsing the Yuli Watercolors Etsy reviews and her Instagram, I found that the primary use case for these paints was hand lettering. I definitely do feel like these paints would better suit crafters rather than fine artists, but since I primarily paint, we're gonna see how these work in an illustration. I also test these out on a 3D object where you can see the paint gleaming in the light at different angles at the same time. Stick around to the end to see how that works out. Now, in order for something to be holographic rather than simply iridescent or duochrome, it has to... Hold on, I'm gonna let somebody far more knowledgeable than me explain this.
All the shifting rainbows that it needs to have to be real hollow.
If you didn't catch that, holographic specifically means that the entire rainbow spectrum is present in the pigment. So if a pigment shifts from purple to green, but it's missing yellow and red or some other color, it's duochrome and not holographic. And don't get me wrong, I love me some duochrome, but these paints said they were specifically holographic, and I wanted to see if that lived up to the test. From what I can tell of the hologram series pigments, they are truly holographic. The entire spectrum of color is present depending on how the light hits it. What pigment makes... what? I guess it's plastic? What makes something holographic? What are you made of? The glitter particles, especially in the next level glitter, display what's called a scattered holographic effect, where you can see the individual chunks of pigment displaying the holographic effect. But what I wanted to know was if the holo was a fine enough pigment to display what's called a linear holographic finish, which is what you more traditionally see when you think of holographic, like my planner here or these stickers available in my online shop. So I did swatch the whole thing, and I thought I was filming, but it turns out my camera was on, but I hadn't pressed record because I'm dumb. Apologies for that, but I've re-swatched some of my favorites from the 3 collections so you can get an idea of how the pigment works in motion. I also swatched these next to some other iridescent watercolors I own so that you can get an idea of what the differences are between iridescent watercolors and these color shifting and holographic ones. The G series dot card set was the most interesting to me for its oil slick appearance. Without direct light shining on them, the pigments are a little bit dark. I suspect that may be due to contrasting color combinations within the pigments, but when you shine a light on them, they color shift in incredible ways. I think my favorites are G1 and G8. The Ocean's 8 set seems to all have a blue base color with different hues for the color shifting aspect. I bought these on a whim because I love blue and teal, but I don't actually see myself using it all that often. Both the G series and Ocean's 8, as well as the holo paints in my opinion, show up best on black backgrounds. Now, these holo paints are what I purchased this set for in the first place. I just, couldn't help myself from also picking up some of the other color shift collections. Next level glitter is by far the most obviously holographic, since the glitter chunks are so big and able to reflect light so well. I'm usually not such a fan of glitters, So I was hoping the finer milled pigments in the holo would still reflect the light well enough to be a true holographic pigment. While I do see the holographic nature of the pigment in the holo, it's difficult at times to make out, and most of the time it kind of looks like a standard silver iridescent paint. I think my favorite of the bunch would be Stardust, which I don't believe has officially launched yet. It has almost the same vibrant rainbows as the Next Level Glitter, but the glitter chunks are much smaller. That being said, I still don't use glitter pigments all that much, so practically I'd find myself using the holo more for its smoother finish. Editing note, Stardust is out now along with this new Onyx holographic paint. The dot cards have also changed a little bit since the one I got. They have this new 3D holo, I don't know what that is. Coming back to the question, will the holo produce a linear holographic effect? Kind of. It's hard to get it to show up on paper, but with the right lighting conditions and angle, you can start to see that rainbow line appear. It shows up best when the object is slightly round in some way. We'll get to that. Yuli Watercolors also included these 2 random samples, and I don't know what they are because they're not labeled. And I looked on her Etsy and I could not find anything that matched. There's this dot of this pearlescent looking silver that almost has a maybe blue or pink cast depending on how the light hits it, and it really only shows up well on a black background. The other sample is this bright green pigment with a color shifting purple glitter within it. It shows up completely differently on black versus white backgrounds. I also picked up what Yuli calls a mini pan of the holo pigment because I anticipated wanting to use more of this pigment than just the dot card would provide, and honestly I think I anticipated well. This is my favorite pigment of the bunch. If you buy single pans from Yuli, they come in a full pan, a half pan, a quarter pan, and mini pans. Mini pans probably fill about 1/3 of a typical half pan, I would say. Here's a comparison. Also, that green sample comes in an even smaller pan than a mini pan. Have you ever seen a watercolor pan this tiny? It's so small! It's a little baby pan! I love it! Something to note about activating these watercolor pans is that, like most iridescent watercolors, you kind of have to drop a little bit of water on the pan and let it soak in for a minute so that the pigment can absorb that water before they start to apply very well. Otherwise, you'll just be scrubbing and scrubbing, and it'll seem like you're not getting any pigment transfer, and you're gonna be really disappointed with it. Since the color shift depends on the angle of the camera, or, your eye, they look great on round or polygonal shapes where the angle of the object recedes into space automatically. Paper, being flat, doesn't show off their properties quite as well as I'd like, but that's just the nature of the pigment. It's incredibly difficult to show off the full spectrum of these paints on camera. I've tried a few different cameras in different lighting conditions, and honestly, nothing does it justice compared to seeing it in real life. Additionally, if you're somebody who makes prints out of your work, you might know already that paints with any sort of reflective material usually don't scan well, and these are no exception. So for the illustration that you're seeing, I'm going in with waterproof ink as a base. I'm not going to be creating the full piece with these paints alone. During one of my live streams over on Twitch, by the way, if you want to see me paint live on Twitch, I do that every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern. I used metallic watercolors to create a full painting. And while the effect can be interesting, I find they can be hard to work with sometimes. The shimmer can really get in the way of rendering the full figure, and I find that metallic paints ironically make a subject look kind of flat if you try to use the paint with the whole thing. So to really make the shimmer pop, I tried to save it for some accent areas. That way they accentuate the painting instead of getting in the way. I was hoping that by creating a web of lines almost, the paint would cover a large enough area to showcase the holographic pigment without using a ton of pigment to just cover the whole area, but it still honestly doesn't show up well on camera at all. I went over the lines with a second coat of paint, this time using the Next Level Glitter Holo for some chunky, glittery punch, and I think it helped a little bit, but not a ton. The thing I noticed about the Next Level glitter is that since it's so chunky, it shows a lot of the paper in between the chunks. Layering it over top of the holo is a great way to keep the chunky glitter effect, but still have a solid layer of holo underneath so you don't get patches of paper showing through. I think this would make a great holographic sticker design, or maybe an enamel pin if I simplify the lines some. Pop a starry eye emoji in the comments if you want to stick this swirly lady on all the things. I mentioned earlier that I think these paints might show up best on a multifaceted 3D object. So I tried it out on this paper crane I painted with holographic in the middle and a few of the G Series and Ocean's 8 pigments on its wings, head, and tail. I think this really shows off the color shifting well. You can see the wings shift from green and blue to purple and red as the object moves. Give this video a like for me if you thought it was interesting, and let me know, would you use holographic paints? What for? I've got a shipment of some wacky paper coming in the mail, crossing my fingers that arrive safely because it's coming from Australia. So if you're into weird art supplies, make sure you're subscribed because I don't want you to miss that one. And if you want more weird art supplies right now, check out this review of these neon paints that I've been using. Until next time, take care.